and excited? Okay, continue. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Virtually Yours. I am honored and excited to be hosting this lovely, my fellow Giants fellow, Siphiwe Gloria Ndlovu, the author of the Sunday Times shortlisted, which is a second novel. The first one won the Sunday Times. This is The History of Men, which is her new novel, which we'll be discussing in this session. And Siphiwe, used her privilege as an award-winning writer and said she doesn't do readings. So, so I'm gonna read a little excerpts from her book right at the beginning. And I will mention why I'm reading this particular excerpt, because she said she wasn't gonna read. Yeah, anyway. Life on the outpost would have continued uninterrupted on this steady path that showed every sign of leading to only more happiness. If a native girl had not arrived on the patch of grass that masqueraded as a lawn and stood where a veranda should have been, but the native girl had arrived carrying a baby boy with skin the color of tea with milk in it, and a generous spray of curly sand-colored hair, and their arrival changed everything. The native girl had asked for Walter, and this, not the presence of the native girl or the existence of the brown baby in her arms, but the fact that she had simply asked for Walter was what struck Gemma the most. She had not asked for Bass or Mr. Musgrave or Mr. Walter, just Walter. The native girl had not cast her eyes down as she spoke to Gemma, as the short history lived together with the Europeans had taught most natives to do. Uncharacteristically and rather defiantly, the native girl had looked Gemma in the eye, shifted the baby on her hip, and said, "I asked to see Walter." Instead of responding, Gemma clutched at her throat, which made a gurgling sound as she stifled a primitive and primal scream. The omnipresent heat had at that moment become unexpectedly oppressive. Gemma felt the back of her neck grow very hot before she suddenly became lighthearted. In the confusion of her lightheartedness, she became determined. She had been born in Africa. There was no way the unforgiving heat would affect her. She raised her chin rebelliously and tilted it against the heat before falling on her kitchen floor in a fainted heap. Gemma must have hit her head on the concrete floor because she woke up with a bump on her forehead and a migraine. The now oppressive heat was still there. The native girl and the baby boy were also still there. The only thing new was Walter Musgrave walking toward her, carrying a glass of water in one hand and gesturing towards the native girl and the baby boy with the other. "I see you've met Lily and my son," Walter Musgrave said casually, without the slightest hint of the mortification he surely must have felt on such an occasion and it having been thus discovered. "Somewhat incorrigible, Lily," Walter Musgrave went on, offering Gemma the glass of water. The water in the glass was steady, suspiciously so. Gemma examined the hand that carried the glass of water and noticed that it did not tremble. The hand was as steady as the heartbeat of a saint. "She does not think the rules of propriety apply to her," Walter Musgrave said, with something very much like indulgent affection in his voice. Gemma stared at the mouth that had uttered these words, the very mouth that had told her that she was the epitome of beauty and femininity, and finally understood its treachery. "Get out!" Gemma snarled before hitting the glass of water out of Walter's Musgrave's hand and onto the wall. With a little satisfaction, she watched the glass shatter and then litter the floor with tiny, dangerous pieces that gleamed like diamonds in the dust. That was all she had energy for before she crumpled back into a forlorn heap. Gemma had been too distraught throughout this entire scene to notice her son watching it unfold from within the shadows of his room. Maybe she would have acted better had she known that she had an audience. Right. And so we see Emil, who thinks that he has very reasonable parents as a child, experiencing his mother being a racist right at the beginning. Tell me about that, because racism is actually quite a vile thing, but somehow you made Emil a human of his time and circumstances. How was it creating this guy?
So first of all, thank you, Zukiswa, for the introduction and for the reading. I'd also like to thank the Goethe-Institut. I also want to say, as you can see, we've run out of electricity went out, so I don't know how long I'll be with you for. But to answer your question, I think recreating that past was not difficult because it's not really the past, right? It's still our present.
Very much our present.
Yeah. To look around you and kind of telescope that in some ways. I mean, you and I talk about this when we do talk about, growing up in Zimbabwe in the 80s and 90s and how, some of these attitudes were very much present, even in the people that, we thought were friends and stuff like that. So I think it's sort of a very subtle racism that he's experiencing as a child, which is how we experience these things and then we take them in because they don't seem, as you said, vile, right? It's very insidious the way racism works. And so I think he's very much surrounded by it, and it seems so very, it's like normal, right? It's like what happens. And her reaction is not something that she thinks is out of the ordinary. She thinks Lily is the one that's done something out of the ordinary. And so I think for me, recreating that world is not so difficult because I, in many ways, grew up in that world. But I think it's always important to remember that a lot of things change and then a lot of things stay the same. So that's partly why I wrote The History of Man.
I'm fascinated by the two, maybe the two generations, or maybe three generations, if I will, of the courtiers, because Gemma is incredibly self-centered and narcissistic, so her racism actually stems from the fact that, there is, of course, the big narrative about how, the threatening black male who's going to rape the white woman. But in this case, it's the fact that she is losing a male admirer to a black woman. Like, how dare he, And I wonder whether you could talk something about that, about her own narcissism. And of course, I mean, that also ties in obviously with her husband as well later on,
So I think for me, what the book generally does or is trying to do is critique the whole colonial narrative. And I think the colonial narrative said something to men and then said something a little different to women. So it say to women, to white women, you are the epitome, right? You are the epitome of beauty. You're the thing that we are protecting. So it's okay for us to be violent against these black bodies because we're protecting you from them, right? So there was a whole narrative that shields this white female body from a lot of these things that are happening. And if you take in that narrative and you believe it, which is what obviously she's done, then everything that's happening in that moment does not make sense, right? Because if she is the epitome of beauty, why has this man who spent so much time admiring her and painting her then gone ahead and been with what she would call a native woman? So I think for me, this is a narrative that needs to be, explored. So when we talk about colonialism, we talk a lot about, what happens a lot to the black body, but we don't talk about, sort of like the the things that happened in terms of race, in terms of gender. And for me, that's also just as important, because when you say, in the same breath that you're saying white women are so precious, you're saying Black female bodies are objects, right? So like a white woman could be looked at by a Black man, and that Black man would have, you know, had to sort of like suffer through a lot of consequences. But a Black woman's body could be raped, could be killed, could be whatever by anyone, basically. And because she's an object, nothing really happens. So I think for me, it was that juxtaposition that was necessary and important to also work through when I was writing the novel, because these things obviously interest me, but I think it's always important to think about how racism and colonialism work in these very gendered ways that are very different and give us different experiences of the same system, right? And so that's what I was doing. But yeah, I like that you call her narcissist, because for me, she really is just someone who believes, just like Emil comes to believe the narrative that she grows up with, right? This narrative that says, oh, no, you know, you're perfect just the way you are. You don't need to change anything, you know? And maybe there's a lot that needs to change there, right? So, yeah.
I think my looking at Gemma as a narcissist is because I am juxtaposing her with other women that you have in the text, you know? I mean, okay, Cookie is not like the brightest cookie in the in the cookie jar, you know, but I'm thinking about Beatrice by Beaufort, for instance, and who, by the way, you always give her full title, and I love that. That amused me immensely, because I actually could think of Emil referring to her in that way, and as well as Mariam, you know, because they back the trend. They say, you know what, we're not going to, and they are the generation after Gemma, so they're like, no, we're not doing this. And I mean, of course, they suffer for it in two very different ways, and it makes it very difficult for Emil, who's grown up with this, you know, with these ideas, for him to lose it. What were you trying to do? I know what you were trying to do. I think I know and I understood what you were doing, but perhaps you could tell our audience who haven't read your book as much as I have. I've read it like 3 times now. Just what you were deciding to do with these women who were like, you know, and even of course we also have men. We have Cecil, but we'll come to him a little. We have Courtney rather, but we'll come to him a little bit later. But I'm concerned about these 2 particular women versus Gemma and the other women that were in the community in the City of Kings.
So for me, I think the book definitely goes through a change, and it's a very subtle change. So I think we have in the 1920s and 30s these very sort of like strong views on race that, you know, change. So if you notice, like in the beginning, Black people are called the natives, and then they're called the Africans, and then they're called the Blacks. So all that sort of like mirrors different kinds of changes that people are also thinking around things like gender. So I think, for instance, by the time, like you say, this next generation comes along, it's the 50s and 60s, and all of a sudden things are opening up in their own ways of thinking about these things. I think Cookie does not necessarily do that successfully, right? She sort of like is able to marry the ideas of the past to her own present. But I think people like, now Beatrice is just like she's anti the whole colonial privilege thing. So she's just gonna go out and she's gonna do the opposite. And then I think Marian has her own secrets, right? And so she's navigating a very interesting space there. And, yeah. So I think it's you know, I think it's important to show, even when I said, you know, that it's gendered, that colonialism is gendered in certain ways. I think it's also important to show the differences in those gendered experiences too. So I think, you know, just because I'm writing about white women, they're not all going to react to colonialism the same way. And over time, obviously things change. But I think Cookie is a great reminder that even though some attitudes are changing, you know, some people are still holding on to the attitudes of the past. And so I think, that's just how life is. Some of us move on, some of us don't, some of us hold on in the name of tradition or whatever, the things that used to happen. And I think this happens, like you said, with the male characters too. We see these different ways of responding to changing times. And I think that's the wonderful thing about the period that I'm writing about, is that it's one of constant change. I mean, it's like 60 years where every 10 years there's these huge shifts that are happening within the country or within the city of Kings, as I write. Yeah.
I think, I remember you telling me when I finished reading it, I told you that one of the things that this book reminded me of is it reminded me of Spud, and you told me you hadn't read it. And it was, and the reason it reminded me of it is because the teachers, the English teachers in the school, in Emil school and in John Milton Spud's book, John Spud Milton's story, are the ones that left, they're liberal, they look at things a little bit more differently, while you have something a little bit different with the macho sportsman type coaches and stuff and everything. And perhaps a commentary, I thought, of brain over brawn, because there was also a certain sensitivity that came through with Courtney, because he was such a literature and dramatic arts and artistic type of person. And yet I can't help but think, wow, I don't know whether I would have been as open-hearted. Any normal men that I know would have been as open-hearted as Courtney, What were you doing there, Siphiwe?
What? Which part are you talking about? His marriage to Marion?
When you find out that Emil has kicked it, and then when Emil's like, when he goes to him and he says to him, "Did you tear my wife's dressing gown?" and Emil says, yes, I did. You can punch me if you want. And he says, "No, I'm not gonna punch you." What was that? Because I wanted to punch him. I wanted to punch him.
No, I think the wonderful thing about Courtney for me is that he has a history of Emil that no one else has, or he has access to a history. So I think he actually looks at Emil through a very long lens, and he understands sort of like where Emil is coming from and some of the things that Emil himself does not like to acknowledge that have happened to him, right? And so I think he brings all that into his understanding of his friend. I mean, we'll debate whether they're really friends or not, but he brings that to bear on this person. And I think it just shows like an understanding of human psychology, right? That I think is, maybe we would now say before his time, but I think he understands that he's dealing with someone who's broken and someone who is not necessarily always going to make the right choice. And he chooses to forgive that. I mean, he chooses to forgive a lot of things, but that's one of the things he chooses.
I mean, I was like, this guy is more forgiving than Jesus, man. Serafina asked, is that a post-colonial feminist novel? It must be. No, Serafina, it's not quite. It's actually written from a perspective of a colonialist, racist. That's the main character, and somehow. Siphiwe manages to amazingly make this guy, even as you resent all that he is, even as you cancel him way before cancel culture, you also realize how damaged he is from school, from home, and then from school, and everything that he's been taught about masculinity, So I think it's more of a masculinity type of narrative, I think, rather than a feminist novel, unless we're looking at feminism in the way of off. You know, in the way of, there's some minor characters, obviously, like Lily, who is the other that were too often uncomfortable. Siphiwe, are you still with me?
Yeah, so you were breaking up for me, so I didn't hear most of that. Sorry.
Oh, okay, all right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly now. Yeah.
Okay, all right. No, I was just saying that I think it's more of a colonial, it's more of a masculinity type of narrative. And what you do so brilliantly with it is how, you know, despite all the vile things that Emil is, he's not a good friend, he's not a good husband, he's not a good father, he's not, the only thing that is a good thing is he's a good colonialist, you know? And
colonizer, yes, yes.
Yeah, and yet somehow you manage to show him to be a person worth, you know, to show him with even his quirks, because even as a father, his child doesn't realize, but the reader realizes that this guy kind of loves his son, you know. Yeah. So I wanted to maybe like just talk about that a little bit. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, about the how you as the creator, the type of prejudices that you had to shed while you were drawing this character, because it must have been a difficult character to write.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people say that. I think, you know, going back to the feminism question, I think I was really helped in life and with writing this novel from just being a Black feminist, in the sense that I read Black feminism. So as sort of like this intersectional and understanding of intersectionality and positionality. So I think for me, it becomes about looking at a character through all these different angles. And then, you know, what makes it not easy to write, because writing a character is never easy, but like what makes it not so difficult to write a character like Emil is that there's some of those things about him that I intersect, you know, with him. So for instance, the going to boarding school, the, like you said, the not so great teachers who have very interesting views about race. All those things are things that we share. So I can actually then use that to open up other facets of his character as an entry point. Emil as a character has been with me, I think, you know, I know for more than 10 years. And I think when I first thought of him, you know, it was a very, he was going to be like you said, a racist, womanizer, colonialist, and that was it. You know, he wasn't, you know, the first ideas of him, because he was so different. Like he was so initially so vile that I was just like, oh no, you know, I'm just gonna probably poke fun at this character. And then when I started writing, I started from his childhood, and then that changed everything, because once you know how someone starts, you begin to understand them a whole lot better. And I realized that his childhood, although on the outside it seemed normal and it seemed in certain moments very beautiful, had these moments that had obviously affected him, but he didn't have the language, right, with which to then maneuver through what had happened. And so he just moves on in life. And he is a result of all those things. He doesn't think of it that way, for sure. But as a writer, I then realized that he ends up the way he is because of a lot of different things that happened to him. And one of those things that happened to him is just being put in this narrative, and he doesn't question it, right? Where he is at the top of everything. He's sort of like, you know, the white supremacy narrative, but he doesn't question it because there's nothing around him that really allows him to question it when he's young. As he grows older, there are people who question it, but he does not, because he's sort of like I said, it's very insidious. So he just absorbs it, and it becomes a part of the way he thinks until it's very, very late. And there's nothing he can do about it, which is part of his tragedy, is that he can't unthink the way he thinks or unlearn the way he has come to think. So for me, it was a character that was, like you said, it taught me a lot about my own made me have to think about the way I think about a lot of things, because he's a character that is very opposite in many, many ways to who I am. And I think it was just great to be able to also be challenged that way, you know, to say, I have to still give him his humanity. I still have to allow him to be someone that people empathize with, even though I don't agree with A, B, C, D that he does. And I don't agree with many things that he does. So it was challenging in that way, but it was also like a, you know, an experience and an education for myself, you know, and I think, you know, yeah. So I actually really appreciate writing that character, because he did, in the end, teach me a lot and give me a lot.
And of course, you bring in like some real historical figures as you write this. The adulation and adoration that Emil has for Goethe-Institut, you know, who is somebody we were all bashed down with when we did Zimbabwean history when we were growing up. And how you turn that so beautifully around, you know. How did that come to you? Like, I just absolutely adored what you did with that.
Yeah,
with Marian.
Yes, I'm not going to give it away, because that'll be to give away.
No, that one we won't give away. That one you need to get the book, either from the draw or you'll get it later. You know, you buy it yourself. But yeah.
So for me, you know, like you said, you know, growing up in Zimbabwe, this is a figure that is revered, or was revered by in a certain moment. You know, he's a great white hunter. He's this, he's that, and I just was researching once, because, you know, I wanted to find out more about him, and I realized, you know, what happens in the end of the book is really what happened, and I thought, oh my gosh, yes. So he did have that aspect of him, yes.
I swear, I just felt like you were really like just taking artistic license, and oh wow.
Yeah, so I thought, wouldn't that be nice to work it in somehow, you know, that other aspect, and just not have it be so obvious from the very beginning. And yeah, you know, I can't say too much because, you know, but it was a great find, I'll say that. It was a great moment in research. You're like, yeah.
Okay, guys. If you weren't already going to get the book, please get this book. That is a fantastic plot twist about your colonial masters. Right. Okay. I do want to like just reveal a little something right at the beginning. I don't think it's too harmful. And this is before Emil has gone to the school where he's going to Salute School for Boys. What was that built around? Is that like founders, or which Bulawayo school is that built around?
So actually, it's built around what's that school in the Midlands? My uncle went there.
No, because there is Salute, there's Goethe-Institut, but
no, yeah,
but there is another one.
Chaplain. Which one? So it's built around the idea of chaplain. So chaplain is where Ian Smith went to school. So like when I was growing up, you know, that was and then we have Falcon here in Matabeleland, but it was really built around.
Yeah, because it did feel like it was a combination. I felt like there was some Falcon in there somewhere as well. Yeah. You know? with the whole rich master colonial. Wow. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, okay. Now that I know, I shall be looking at boys that went to Falcon very differently. I was already looking at them differently, but now I'll try extra differently. But before he goes to the Salute School for Boys, an incident happens. And guys, I'm quite happy to give this away. You're okay with me giving this away? Because it's very early in the book, you know? Maybe it's better if we actually just read it. Hmm. Hmm. Da-da-da-da. What page is it on? I'm trying to.
No, I don't have the book with me, sorry.
Oh, okay. Hmm. Oh yes, I found it. Okay, so this couple, Emil's father and Emil's mom, Gemma and Johan Kutia, you really just gave them like, yeah. J.M. Kutia would be so proud of you. Anyway. But anyway, so after this little incident of one of the white men having a relationship with a black woman and having a child, the white woman in the story, Gemma, Emil's mom, is so sufficiently traumatized. They decide that they're going to move to the big city. They can't be like, with this, what if their son also decides to go native, type of thing. So they move to the city and they take to going to the movies and doing stuff. So this is what happens. And as I mentioned, I think what's her name is sufficiently narcissistic, and this actually is part of the reason why I say that, this particular passage. So they go to the movies with the son. She's made lunch for her husband, as they did when he comes from work. Emil nodded slowly as his mother said his appearance to rights. Yes, we'll make an entire day of it, and it will all be lovely, very, very lovely indeed. Gemma said as she wrote a note for Johan, who was at work, so this is a note for him. Gemma, determined to have the best day with her son, crossed Borough Street with Emil, held safely and firmly in hand. The day started out promisingly enough. They rode along on the train through Centenary Park, and Gemma, occasionally stroking her son's blonde hair as it was ruffled by the breeze, made herself smile at nothing in particular. When they hopped off the train, she bought them ice cream, which they ate as they made their way to the National Museum of Natural History. They spent a little too much time for Gemma's liking, poring over lithographs, letters, pottery, tools, weapons, fossils, menageries, and trophies that represented some aspect of the country's past. Emil was evidently enjoying himself, and so Gemma let him peruse at his leisure, until she heard him wheeze as he stood before a miniature bungalow that looked very much like the government-issued house that had been their home at the foot of the Matopo Hills. Probably all the dust in the face, Gemma supposed, as she led Emil out of the museum. Hopefully he would feel better at the theater and they could carry on enjoying the day. They did not even make it to the intermission of Anything Goes. Emil's wheezing had at first attracted sympathetic glances that became a few glares here and there, and finally, a united voice that loudly whispered, I judge that it is best you take the poor fellow home. Gemma obeyed the wishes of the many, held Emil by the hand, walked him back up Selborne Avenue to the Prince Mansion, and led him up the stairs. She opened the door to the flats, immediately stopped short, let out a scream. She screams a lot, Gemma, and was very surprised when no sound came out. When Emil saw his father in his mother's red plush hat, black lace and chiffon drop-waist dress, string of pearls, rouge and lipstick, he assumed it was a joke, something funny his father had prepared for his departure. And he was just about to laugh when he saw the look of absolute horror on his mother's face. When he glanced over at his father and saw the guilt, humiliation, and shame on his face, Emil was filled with dread and knew that whatever this was, it was not supposed to be happening. Right. You just didn't want to give this little boy a break. You didn't want to give Emil a break, man. Why?
Yeah, I don't know. For me, that was it's something that actually changed as I was writing that scene. So initially, I had just thought that Johann was like a closeted homosexual. And then as I wrote it, I realized that that's not what it was. And then I thought, this is exactly, I mean, because in some ways books write themselves. And I thought it was a very interesting way to invert and trouble and problematize the things that Emil would later come to think about gender, right? Because at the very heart of that idea is his father and then his son, who are not in any way, what he thinks these roles should be. And instead of that, allowing him some gray in his thinking or some flexibility, it actually does the opposite, because then he sort of like moves himself to this very safe space where this is what it means to be a man. So I actually like that scene because it just changed as I was writing, because like I said, the initial idea was to just have him, be, and then what I did not realize, which I think is why maybe my reading of Gemma is a lot more sympathetic than yours, is that she actually then carries on having a different kind of relationship with her husband, but a relationship nonetheless. Because in the initial idea, she was going to be so angry that she cuts everything off. And then again, in the way that novels do, they started writing these notes to each other, and that became their relationship. And then they invented their own language, and and so I thought, oh, okay, So initially, it was a very very different take on what happens in the novel from my own understanding.
That little thing where she doesn't get out of it, because remember, Scott is there waiting. That little thing where where she carries on, is part of the reason why I say she's narcissistic, because her whole thing is also like she doesn't want people to know that, this is like somebody did that to her. Me, Gemma, everybody adores me. So I think that's part of the reason why she stays with this guy, And she remains his beard for years.
Very, very sympathetic. I think she stays because, she realizes that they love each other, even with that. That it doesn't change the fact that they love each other. But yeah, I know she. I can see why she would come as not a very sympathetic character. Yeah.
And the other thing, the one thing that you also bring about, which I thought was so beautiful and important, because a lot of people don't often highlight this when they're talking about our colonial history, whether in Southern or East Africa. There's always like the bad, and then there's the good. But then you have somebody, you have the good from the other side, and you have the bad from the other side. And I'm thinking here about Courtney, for instance, where here is somebody who is like committed to this cause in his own lefty white liberal way, and what happens to him, to his family, like appends pretty much, everything. Like I think even for somebody like Emil, who might get into a space where he says, okay, maybe, maybe Marion and Courtney can get to a way where they can change the way I look at things. That makes it pretty difficult, doesn't it? And we don't talk too much about how, the wars, that happened, the War of Independence, Chimurenga 1, Chimurenga 2, and hurt both sides in certain ways. Sometimes in light terms, of course, more Black lives were lost, but we also don't talk about that, and I'm glad that you did that. You addressed that in this book.
Yeah, I think for me, like you're saying, for those of us who've inherited, like you say, Murenga, War of Independence, Impi and Kulilega, whatever you want to call it, the Civil War. I feel like we need to think about loss in a very I don't know, I want to say complicated way, or in a way that complicates it, right? Instead of just focusing on numbers and focusing on who was supposedly on what side and all that, we need to think about, you know, losing people as a country. And anytime you lose people, that's already a tragedy. It doesn't matter, you know, what color those people are, it's a tragedy. And I think for me, that was important, but also important in that moment is not even knowing who's responsible, right? Because it could be the freedom fighters, or it could be, you know,
it could be the what you call it as well, you know,
because they're trying to stir things up.
In their flesh.
Yeah. And so for me, it's also important to realize that it's not, you know, war is never black or white. It's never, you know, they are wrong and we are correct. It's you know, bad stuff happens on both sides. People do bad things on both sides for very, you know, sometimes for the same reasons, sometimes for different reasons. But it's to make gray something that I think I grew up for sure being taught is very black and white. You know, there are people who fought for the country and liberated it, and they're the heroes, and the people that they were fighting against are not the heroes. And I think that narrative is a little too simplistic. And we need to be, like I said, we need to make it more complicated and problematize that very, for lack of a better term, black and white history. Yeah. So it was important to me that, you know, that it's that tragic a thing, and it's not known who really did it.
Fantastic. Are there any questions? We have very little time before I start picking up books for the raffle, but are there any questions from the audience? Please just type them in and I will ask Siphiwe. Oh, by the way, congratulations. I heard theory of flight is now going to be a set work in South African.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Exciting. Please remember to buy me wine when you're a millionaire. I mean, I'm serious.
We'll definitely do that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Right, guys, any questions in the audience before I start? So this is my little glass.
I see.
Perspective. Okay, my big glass. Right. And we've got our copies of Theory of Man, the History of Men, not Theory of Flight. I'm gonna like just get them here. Here we are. This is my stash, 5 giveaways. Right. And our first winner, please let us know if you're in the audience. Stephanie Kastner, you are in the audience. Stephanie?
I am, but and I would be very happy to get the book, but I'm working for the Goethe-Institut and I think I should be excluded.
Right. So we give somebody else.
Exactly, because I will, you know, I will get it anyway. So, but thank you. I'm happy that I almost won it.
Okay, Stephanie, you're in Melville, so you can get it either from Book Circle Capital, 27 boxes, or you can get it in at any exclusive books.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll have it for the library anyway. So yeah, but thanks.
All right. Our next winner. Well, our first winner since Stephanie. Helen Ambassa, are you in the house? Helen? Helen Ambassa. Oh, sorry. Going once, going twice.
Oh.
Oh, that's a pity because I know she was so looking forward to winning it.
Oh.
Sorry to miss that. All right. Next. Audrey Brown, you win again. Audrey, you around?
Again, yeah, of course I'm around.
Okay. You are our first winner of the history of men.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Did you get your last book, Audrey?
I did. Yes, I did. Still Jackie.
Oh, fantastic.
I got
All
it.
right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Our next winner. Zenobia Africa. Is Zenobia Africa here? Zenobia Africa going once, going twice. We pick the next potential winner. Helen Harris. Helen Harris, I think this might be the first time we've had you in Helen. Okay, not here. How, Hassan? Why are you this way? I will have you know, much better Hassan logos than the Zambian Electoral Commission or any African electoral commissions. So seriously, Chepchemba Matilong, 1, 2, Chepchemba. Okay, we're still trying to get our second book. Uchenna, you might actually have a chance of winning this time around, the way it's going. Tonerai Chindiko, are you in the audience? Tonderai Chindiko, are you in the audience? Tonde, I guess you aren't. Okay. I guess not. Your name away if it actually comes up, right? Nathaniel Woku, somebody from Ethiopia. Hello. Okay, Nathaniel, I guess you're not here at the moment. You might have missed it. Kisitu Daniel. Kisitu Daniel, going once. Kisitu Daniel, twice. Okay, I guess not Kisitu. Meli Mantu. Meli Mantu. It looks like I'm gonna keep the books, eh? Meli Mantu. I'm gonna sell them like on the street of Nairobi. I'll be like right there in the corner. Serafina Francis. Serafina.
Yes.
Serafina, I think I saw you earlier. Serafina, can you show yourself?
She's there.
Where?
It's just her mic is mute.
Oh, there you are, Serafina. Fantastic. Thank you. You are our second winner. We see you in the audience. Well done. And Hassan, I don't know Serafina. Right. Our third winner, Naledi Nakuta. Naledi. Naledi going once, Naledi going twice, Naledi. No, we don't see Naledi. Okay. Next. Aisha, you're a winner. Are you still here? Or did
Yes,
Wi-Fi throw you off?
fantastic. I am here and I am thrilled. Thank you so much.
Right, 2 more books to go. TJ Benson. TJ, are you here?
No.
Oh, well, sorry. And this is the first time he's absent that he actually gets picked. What a pity. Our next winner. Yenu Woku, Yehenu. Yenu, another Ethiopian. Yenu, are you here? No, not here. All right. So we're looking for the last 2 winners. Alison, you've got a good witch doctor because you've won again. It's like your 3rd win.
Yeah, it is my 3rd win. I just love these books. It's absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
You've got an amazing witch doctor, man. How do you always win?
Just lucky.
You're like 3 for 3 now. And our final winner, looking. Akele Waguma. Akele Waguma is our final winner. Are you here?
Yes, I'm here. I've been praying. Oh,
Congratulations. All right. I will send everybody an email. Alison, I've got your contact. Audrey, I've got your contact. What I will probably do for Audrey and Alison and Akele, I will find you in Nairobi. Audrey and Alison, I know that people were coming for a literature conference to Nairobi early next month, so I will send them. And please, thank you everybody for coming through. And happy reading. And next month we have an exciting somebody from Namibia. We've got Remy Ngamije, and we're looking forward to that. So Remy Ngamije next month, the 2nd week of Saturday as always. Please don't miss it. And thank you everybody for coming. Always as usual, a chance to win 5 books. Siphiwe, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Goethe-Institut Namibia.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Zukiswa. Thank you, Siphiwe, for joining us. And I hope to
Thank
see
you.
you next time.
And remember, we've got our festival in November.
Yay!
So yes, we are going ahead, and Goethe-Institut Nairobi is taking the lead. So thank you very much, Elizabeth. And yes, Uchenna, we've got Remy next month, the writers and rockers.
that was awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.